The nomination of Frank Kendall to become Secretary of the Air Force is moving again after Senator Elizabeth Warren took off her hold on his nomination. One of his new jobs, if the Senate confirms him, could be to shape the entire Defense Department's space enterprise. Matt Donovan's director of the Mitchell Institute Spacepower Advantage Research Center. He's former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness and former Undersecretary of the Air Force, writing about U.S. military space power in Defense News. Matt, welcome. It's good to see you again. That concept that the Air Force Secretary should lead the entire space enterprise, what are the implications for the Air Force and the Space Force the way it exists today? Matt, welcome.
It's really great to see you again. It's great to be back. You know, although the U.S. Space Force is still in its infancy, it's approaching its second birthday. One of the reasons Congress created it was to consolidate and align all our military space capabilities into a single organization under a single independent space commander in order to maximize their effectiveness. This consolidation is off to a slow start for a host of reasons, not least of which are parochial service or agency attitudes. In fact, some of the Defense Committee members on the Hill have been grousing about the space acquisition side of the issue, where they are not yet seeing strong evidence of this consolidation taking hold. There are dozens of disparate organizations that share in space equities in research, development, and acquisition and operation. This isn't allowing the Space Force to achieve full effectiveness and efficiencies in the development of space capabilities, the expenditure of funds, or in conducting integrated space operations.
This is, what you're getting at here is a challenge that doesn't just have to do with the Air Force and Space Force. It has to do with the Defense Department in general since 1947. Frank has been in the building, knows his way around it very well, but that inertia and that turf power, that battle that the services fight, offices fight with each other within services and so on, is tremendously powerful. How does one break that, especially in something that is as new as space, the space enterprise and the Space Force in particular, Matt?
Well, Francis, with the advent of a new armed service, the Space Force, to deal with the new warfighting domain of space, it's time for a serious and full-body roles and missions review across the Department of Defense. It's only through such an effort like this that roles and responsibilities can be clarified between the services so we can optimize America's military for the 21st century threat. The Key West Agreement, which emerged from the Truman administration in 1948 after the National Security Act of 1947 created the Department of the Air Force, it was last modified by the Eisenhower administration in 1954. No fundamental changes to the definition of the functions of the armed services and the Joint Chiefs of Staff has occurred since that time. So with the advent of advanced technology, a new warfighting domain, and aggressive behavior by potential adversaries, we need this to fire on all cylinders.
So in this piece, I'm a history guy. I love reading history, and World War II history is an area of new interest to me. You reference a battle here that I hadn't gotten to yet. Why is this the example that you cited in this Defense News piece, Matt, about the prospect that the situation that we're discussing presents?
Well, you know, the first battle of Kasserine Pass was the very first engagement, major engagement by American forces in World War II. And, we had lack of readiness. We had lack of leadership experience in leading in battle. And we had those sort of same parochial attitudes towards the new air forces, air power, if you will, where it was used as an extension of artillery for Army, and they assigned indigenous capabilities to the land force units. And it was to the detriment. And it had disastrous results because they weren't able to gain and maintain air superiority, which we know today is a prerequisite to any warfighting operation, successful anyway. So I think it really needs to be applied to the space power domain as well, if you think about it, because we'll always have limited space assets, and they need to be command and controlled by an independent space commander that can maximize their effectiveness by centrally controlling them.
You write it this way: the Secretary of the Air Force, through the Chief of Space Operations, must act as the chief architect for the Department of Defense's space enterprise to ensure all DoD military space capabilities are aligned and synchronized. Is that alignment and synchronicity possible if the scenario that you outlined doesn't happen, Matt?
Well, I think it's absolutely mandatory that we'll have to do that because, space has prior to about 15, 20 years ago, it was a benign domain. And it was used primarily as a support force, providing communications, navigation, that sort of thing. And although America didn't choose to make it a warfighting domain, our adversaries have certainly gone there. And General Raymond, the Chief of Space Operations, and the Secretary of Defense have all been talking about the advent of this new threat. So if we don't do this, I think that we'll just be splintered and not optimized to our maximum effect.
Matt Donovan, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to see you, Francis.